This teacher applauds his student because his wife ridiculed him. The movie begins with a girl named Cairo. His parents, who are lawyers and work abroad, have left their tutuli alone, and as she lives alone in Shane's house. Writing is his way of relax. This walk through the forest to arrive at school wearing a miniskirt and high heels, and when it reaches the school meets its teacher, Jonathan Miller, a middle-aged guy who had tried to be a writer but failed at it. It try and now teach classes ons. The girl enters the classroom. Jonathan tells her start reading the coverage of everything the quarter as I arrived at classes early, but Cyrus tells him that I had read everything, that leaves the teacher amazed as they were talking about 12 books. While they were talking, one of the students arrives back from Jonathan called Winnie. Cairo is also a good friend of hers, so the two, they go out to eat together. And when they get together, where the teacher approaches the Cairo desk for viewing books that I was reading, entering that at that moment a friend of the teacher called Boris approaching him while he was reading and takes the bow. Okawe to see how the story was interesting. When it arrives at home, his wife Beatrice was in the computer doing its job. He tries to spend time with her, but woman did not give him the slightest attention. She insists until she finally looks at him eyes and immediately and tells him with great emotion that one of her students, I was reading his book. But while they were talking to Emi, one of her classmates, Work, called her quickly and passed. This is how both begin to understand each other, raising the tone of things a bit. But unexpectedly, her friend returned to her call, leaving Jonathan eager to be able to continue the next day. He told Boris about it, adding that his end of week had not been productive, and suddenly they see Cairo coming out of the forest. While they were talking in the field and being face-to-face, he took off his headphones, greeting them formally by asking if he was not afraid to go for it forest. Although the girl only answers him that she was the scariest thing in the hallways. Winnie makes her fall belongings on purpose for Boris she would notice it, but Hare realized that had done on purpose and approached. She asked him what he needed, noticing that she was flirting with him. Cyrus arriving at the same time, telling him who was totally crazy. Later on House of Cyrus, both have an extensive conversation, because Cyrus was worried for not having any achievement other than being the best student. Boring, but win. He tries to advise her by saying that experiment with something to make it it's worth writing it. For example, relationships between teachers and students, making fun of Cairo. But it is here where her friend confesses to her that she would like the teacher. Boris makes her debut for the first time. Well, she doesn't want it to be with a boy, anyone who downloads uploaded videos in tone and then handled proposing to her friend that she should try with Professor Miller. But confused Cairo says that she is 20 miles away years old, and that would be enough strange, although he's insisting, telling him that there is nothing wrong with it and that should doing. So by also adding that Jonathan, he seems like a nice and friendly man, which makes it a good choice, make her debut for the first time as the days go, by the interest in the teenager for experimenting with the professor. While this one always stays looking at him in class, noticing that she wants to be by your side. And here the teacher Miller appears behind her and whispers in his ear to go to his office after classes. So, in said place, the teacher recommends you go to meeting where they read poetry on weekends. Well, it's sure that it will enchant to partake advantage to congratulate her on one of her writings. It seemed so interesting that I memorizes several stanzas for impress her, be feeling moved and happy to know that Jonathan was interested in her. He wanted Cyrus, I would write a short story. But this one once suggested that he write it to style of your favorite author, and if the history likes will approve all the semester, for which Ciro is very happy. Ciro accepts in the middle of the conversation. He tells his teacher that he had read his book, telling him how much he loves it. Miller had liked, feeling well because he knew that his lesser-known book had caught the attention of his student, confessing at the same time that has no longer, I've been writing something again for a long time since his marriage. He had a more normal life and has had nothing interesting to write within a book. Days later, Cairo went where his teacher had recommended him to go, with the idea of finding him out there, taking the surprise when he approaches by behind and whispers in his ear, telling him then Jonathan, who for a long time had been improving his skills reading and writing. At the same time, Amanamet Elliot read them poems while Cyrus listened attentively what the teacher told him, and after a while, Cairo confesses that he likes the place was very much the opposite of what she thought, starting to smoke a little, and how they feel confident the other shares it with his teacher. They both meet again the next day, and we see that Cairo was dressed in different way at the request of her friend to impress his teacher. Aside, he brings coffee to both Boris and Miller sitting next to his teacher. Once Boris had left, seeing them with more confidence, arriving at the about to play with his glasses between themselves and sharing a cigarette, and later Ciro confesses to him to Winnie that the teacher didn't say anything about his new clothes, but he knows well who was delighted. As soon as she finished the Cairo class, tells Miller that decided that he will work his story with the style of the author named Henry Miller, which surprises the teacher. Well, the books by this author have a story with a lot of romanticism and eroticism. For what, you think it would not be a very good idea, as well as being quite controversial for the school. although the girl insists that it can be quite interesting when you think about it a bit, and tells her that he trusts her by leaving then to go on vacation for a few days with his wife. Beatrice, once he leaves, Professor Wynne started to make fun of Cairo because he thinks she is trying approaching your teacher by making a small performance of how it was seen on reality. And meanwhile, Ciro was looking for his cell phone, but he couldn't find it because nowhere. And at the same time, the plans of Jonathan kept falling behind because Beatrice kept talking to her friend, but suddenly in the briefcase of Trang, this was a phone ringing while he was waiting for his wife, surprising her. Listen to Cyrus speak, telling her that he had put his phone in his briefcase by accident. So Miller offers to take Cairo's phone to his house, telling him to drive carefully, as it was going to rain, when he arrived and saw Cyrus leaving his house with a quite provocative dressmaking that remains paralyzed, admiring his beauty. Cyrus approached him, while they stared at each other, ending up kissing and hugging each other in the rain. Both they were stunned after the intense momentum, and Jonathan's thoughts they were not where they should be. And hours later, Cyrus sends him the work that he had mail order. Beatrice on her part chased him to leave her alone because he didn't let Miller work at this leisure, so he left and went to a small house nearby his own, and while he was there he printed immediately the finished work of Cairo, and he started reading it. Ashireds with Thathi is quite hooked on the story. While this tells the story of a teacher and his student, which tells the relationship they have of a more intense way, and when the history reaches its peak, Jonathan imagines Cyrus in the scene, eager to please his lust by doing that. This one ends up doing some work manuals. The next day Cairo appeared with an even more provocative dress, but it seemed that Jonathan's mood had changed from one day to the next, because neither he didn't even greet her when she came in. So she asks him if everything was okay, and the teacher answers that he was disgusted with what she had written, mentioning that it is inappropriate and exhorting them. Even after Cyrus told Jonathan that it was off them, he still did not believe what she said, and did not want to listen to one word more, telling him that if he doesn't write a new story, will have no choice that suspending it. Miller insulted the Cairo's job and felt bad about it. Trust her when she tried to tell him how Shirley felt, but the girl gets quite angry and rates the teacher's work as mediocre. Miller insisting that they were only teacher and student. What made him angry even more, he tells him that he hopes he knows what he did because the cost that can getting to pay could be very high. After this, Miller arrived home, and at the same time, Beatrice noticed how sad he was, asking him what was wrong. And although at first Jonathan did not want to tell what happened at the end, he said that it had to do with his student commenting that he was not happy with the story from Cairo because it had a language inappropriate, and as Beatrice was interested in knowing what it was about story, Jonathan began to read it, and already, when he reached the highest part of ton of the story, Beatrice tries level up things and flame then begins to emerge in both of them. However, they are interrupted by Boris stopping the intense moment of the couple at the same time. Cairo time was accompanied by Winnie after Miller's rejection, and after several drinks, Cairo invites his friend to take some racy photos for Winnie, sends it to Professor Boris, so Cairo's plans begin to take shape. Take your course below. Jonathan received the photos from Beatrice. The message, he told Jonathan that they had found out that something was happening between him and Cairo Millers, saying that it was no true, and told everything to his wife, but his wife refused. He says that if true, he could lose his work and even herself a day. Next, both Cyrus and Miller were questioned. Cyrus had spoken first with the director, so he knew what things asked the teacher. The young woman did not. He hid nothing, and told them everything that had passed. So when the Jonathan's turn seemed uncomfortable and guilty throughout the conversation, director listened to both versions. But in the end, Jonathan ended up suspended. When he gets home, he tells Beatrice what this happened, try to explain how things happened, and his only statement was that he had given him special treatment to Cyrus, thing that Beatrice obviously does not have thought, so that they fought and started to yelling and insulting each other. And after that let off steam, Beatrice went with the idea to divorce. Meanwhile, Winnie asks Cyrus to stop with what is doing with Professor Miller. Already, that is very immature of you, but Cyrus did not care about these concerns, and says that Miller the underestimated by threatening Winnie with testifying in favor of the professor. But Cairo warns him that if he does so, he will take out in the light that he has an adventure in secret with Professor Boris, and soon 2 teachers would be acted. Finally, Cyrus wrote about it in your college essay, stating that for her this was her greatest achievement. Meanwhile, Meyer seemed to be inspired again after so many years, and finally they show us both see each other face to face, because it seems that the two were going to attend what it seems to be a school audition, and it is how does the movie end?